Alright, quick hello? This is an original Tales Fair story, and I won't over-explain. Let's start.
At a family celebration, my sister thought it would be funny to introduce my 12-year-old as a stinky niece with cheap clothes and no future. My parents laughed along like it was normal. Then Grandma stood up, smiled, and announced that my daughter was the future, and their faces drained of color. Family celebrations have a special kind of noise, a frequency that sits somewhere between a dentist's drill and a broken violin. Not the fun kind, not the warm wrapping paper rustle of genuine affection, or the clinking of glasses raised in true toasts. No, it is the kind where you can hear a compliment coming 3 minutes before it hits you, because it is being sharpened in someone's mouth like a blade against a whetstone. This particular gathering was held at a rented event hall that smelled aggressively of industrial floor polish and the cloying, heavy scent of rich people's perfume. That specific floral musk that is designed to take up space, to announce a presence before a word is even spoken. The tables were draped in tablecloths so white they hurt the eyes under the halogen lights, and there were too many candles, their flames flickering nervously, as if they too were anxious about the company. A dessert table stood in the corner, looking less like food and more like a museum exhibit, guarded by an invisible velvet rope of social expectation, looking as though it had its own security detail to protect the fondant from unworthy fingers. My grandma was seated at the head table like a small, the elegant general surveying a battlefield she had long ago conquered but still had to patrol. She sat with a posture that defied her years, her spine a rod of iron wrapped in silk, and everyone else orbited her in tight, desperate circles, smiling a little too hard, laughing a little too loud, their eyes darting constantly to see if she was watching. And me, I was doing what I always do in these Shark Tanks disguised as dining rooms. I was trying to keep my daughter, Emma, close without making it obvious that I was acting as a human shield. If you have never had to do that, to stand between your child and your own bloodline, filtering the air they breathe for toxins, congratulations. Your nervous system probably still works the way it was designed to. Emma was 12, tall for her age. You're all elbows and knees in that heartbreakingly awkward phase of metamorphosis where the body grows faster than the soul can catch up. She possessed this calm, quiet competence, a stillness that made adults either like her immediately or resent her deeply for existing without needing their validation. Her dress was simple, a garment she had constructed herself using my grandma's old yellowing sewing patterns and a significant amount of stubbornness. It was made of a sturdy navy fabric that absorbed the light rather than reflecting it, with neat, disciplined seams and a tiny hand-stitched detail at the collar, a row of small embroidered leaves that she had worked on for 3 nights straight, sitting under the cone of light from her desk lamp, muttering, "It's not sitting right," until her fingers were sore. If you asked Emma what she wanted to be when she grew up, she wouldn't say rich or famous or admired. She would look you in the eye and say, "Better." She was standing beside me, her fingers worrying the edge of her sleeve, rubbing the fabric between her thumb and forefinger in a rhythmic motion, the way she always did when she was bracing for an impact she couldn't see but could certainly feel. And like clockwork, impact walked over in heels that clicked against the parquet floor like a countdown. My sister, Nicole. Nicole looked like a department store mannequin that had been handed a personality by a focus group and told to weaponize it. Her hair was perfect, a glossy helmet of highlights and lowlights that never moved. Her smile was perfect, a dazzling display of dentistry that didn't quite reach her eyes. And her outfit probably had its own insurance policy, a designer assemblage that screamed money so loud it drowned out conversation. Trailing behind her was Grant, her husband, who always looked like he was trying to remember where he parked his empathy, a man whose primary contribution to the world seemed to be taking up space and agreeing with my sister. Behind him were their 3 kids, Tyler, Avery, and Illa, dressed head to toe in designer labels, looking like they were sponsored by a brand that hated children. Miniature adults who had already learned that sneering was a form of currency. Nicole spotted someone across the room, a woman in a sleek blazer, drink in hand. The kind of person Nicole wanted to impress, someone businessy, cool, new money mixed with old influence. Nicole's eyes lit up with a predatory glint. You could practically hear the gears turning in her head, the calculations of social leverage being run in real time. She reached out and, without asking, hooked a manicured hand lightly around Emma's shoulder, claiming her space, treating Emma not like a niece, but like a prop. A handbag she was about to show off to prove a point. "Come here," Nicole said, her voice bright and artificial as a TV host. Emma stiffened, her spine locking up. I took one step closer. It wasn't dramatic. No flailing arms, just a subtle positioning, like I was quietly placing myself between my child and a moving vehicle. Nicole dragged Emma toward the woman. "You have to meet my niece," she said, laughing already, the sound bubbling up from a place that held no joy. The woman smiled politely. "The way you do when someone is pulling you into a family dynamic you did not consent to and are desperately trying to escape." "This," Nicole announced, squeezing Emma's shoulder just a bit too tight, her nails digging into the navy fabric, "is my stinky niece." She waited for the laugh like it was a punchline she'd paid money for. I felt Emma go still beside me, not frozen like a statue, but still like a prey animal trying to become invisible against the background. Nicole leaned in, enjoying herself, feeding off the discomfort. "She insists on wearing those cheap little outfits she makes," she said, her voice dropping to a tone of playful disgust that was neither playful nor disgusted, just cruel. "Thinks she's creative." Her mouth curled into a smirk. "And honestly, with clothes like that and an attitude like hers, no future." There it was. The line delivered like a joke, but sharp enough to draw blood. A precise incision into a 12-year-old's self-worth. Nicole laughed like she'd just invented comedy. My mom laughed too. That little airy, breathless laugh that says, "We're all in on it, isn't this fun?" My dad chuckled like it was harmless, like it was normal, like crushing a child's spirit was just a family tradition, passed down like silverware. Emma's fingers tightened on her sleeve until her knuckles turned white. Her gaze dropped to her shoes. Her shoulders did that tiny inward fold that kids do when they are trying not to cry in public, trying to collapse into themselves so there is less surface area to be hurt. And I, of course, stood there in that split second where time dilates. There is a moment in situations like that where you can either explode or protect. Exploding feels good for about 8 seconds. It burns hot and bright and leaves ash everywhere. Protecting lasts longer. Protecting builds a wall. So I didn't say what my body wanted to say. I didn't scream or flip the table. I stepped closer, put my hand lightly at the small of Emma's back, grounded her. A warm, present weight that said, "I am here. You are real." The woman in the blazer didn't laugh. Not really. She gave a tight, pained smile, her eyes darting around the room like she was looking for an exit sign or a fire alarm to pull. A cousin across the room stopped chewing mid-bite. Someone else took a sip of wine that lasted too long. The laughter didn't spread the way Nicole expected. It didn't ripple outward. And it landed on the table like a dead fish, cold and smelling of rot. Nicole's kids smirked anyway, conditioned to find cruelty entertaining. Tyler whispered something to Avery behind his hand. Illa did that little nose scrunch that kids do when they've learned contempt from watching adults, a mimicry of disdain. My sister's husband, Grant, laughed half a second late, a hollow sound like he wasn't sure which script he was supposed to follow, but knew that silence was dangerous. Emma didn't speak. She didn't correct Nicole. She didn't defend herself or explain the hours of work in her seams. She just stood there, 12 years old, in a dress she'd sewn herself, listening to adults talk about her like she wasn't standing right there, like she was a ghost in her own life. And then the atmosphere shifted. The air pressure in the room seemed to drop. My grandma stood up. Not slowly, not shakily, not like an elderly woman who needed assistance. She stood like a person who had decided she was done letting the room belong to someone else. The chatter softened, then died. Even the clinking of forks against china seemed to hesitate. My grandma smiled, a small, calm, almost amused expression that did not reach her eyes, and looked at Emma first. Not at Nicole, not at my parents, at Emma. "Emma," she said softly. Then she lifted her gaze to the room and began to speak, her voice confident and clear, cutting through the murmurs like a bell. And I realized everyone was listening now, even Nicole, even my parents, drawn in by the sudden gravity radiating from the head table. And when my grandma finally stopped talking, Mom, Dad, and Nicole looked completely pale, drained of blood, as if the very life had been siphoned out of them. If you want to understand why my parents laughed, you have to understand that Nicole and I were raised in a family where cruelty was treated like a personality trait, where sarcasm was the love language, and humiliation was a teaching tool. Nicole wasn't always cruel, not at first, not when we were very small, but she was chosen. Growing up, Nicole was the favorite in the way some families pick a golden child, like it's a hobby, a project to be curated. Nicole was pretty in the conventional way. Nicole was loud. Nicole knew how to present herself for an audience. When Nicole walked into a room, my mom would brighten like someone had turned on a high-wattage lamp. When I walked into a room, my mom would squint, but her eyes narrowing, as if she was checking for stains, for flaws, for something to fix. It wasn't dramatic abuse. It wasn't screaming matches or locked closets. It was 1,000 tiny corrections. "Stand up straighter. Smile more. Why can't you be more like your sister? That color washes you out." I learned early that if I cared about something too deeply, someone would mock it out of me. If I worked hard at something, it was labeled intense or obsessive. If I didn't care about appearances, it was lazy. I wasn't rebellious. I wasn't wild. I just wasn't Nicole. And my dad was the kind of man who thought keeping the peace meant never calling out the person causing the problem, which meant the problem always got fed, grew larger, and took up more space. The only person who ever treated me like a full human being in that house, a person with an interior world worth preserving, was my grandma. My grandma didn't care if your outfit was expensive or if it had a logo on the chest. She cared if your hem was straight. She didn't care if you looked impressive to strangers. She cared if you were capable. She wasn't warm in a gushy, cookie-baking way. She was fair. And when you are the scapegoat in a family, fairness feels like sunlight breaking through a heavy gray overcast. When Emma was born, I had this naive, desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, my family would reset. Like the presence of a child, a new life might make them softer, kinder, less obsessed with whatever imaginary scoreboard they were keeping. They did not reset. They simply transferred the target. Nicole had Tyler, Avery, and Illa, 3 little satellites orbiting Nicole's massive ego. And they were always dressed perfectly, always coached to perform like show ponies, always told they were special in the way that made them look down on everyone else. They would walk into gatherings, like tiny royalty demanding tribute. Emma walked in like a kid who just wanted to sit near the snack table, read a book, and quietly observe the world. And that refusal to perform was enough to make them hate her. Emma didn't do pretty the way Nicole wanted. She didn't do cute. She didn't do look at me. Emma did work. She would spend hours bent over fabric, learning stitches, sketching designs in notebooks, ripping seams to redo them, trying again when it didn't sit right. She would forget to play dress-up because she was too busy building something with her hands. And because she was a kid, that work came with mess. Thread clippings on the carpet, fabric scraps, hair falling out of her ponytail, the faint smell of effort and concentration. So Nicole started calling her Stinky. Not because Emma was dirty, but because Emma didn't prioritize being polished for other people. Because Emma chose craft over performance. And in our family, Opting out of the performance was apparently a crime punishable by public ridicule. Emma started making her own clothes because she loved it, because she liked the control of taking a flat piece of cloth and turning it into a shape, because she liked turning an idea into something real that she could touch. But to Nicole and my parents, it was cheap. They didn't see a child learning a skill, a discipline. They saw a child refusing to play their game of status. And then there was my grandma's business. My grandma didn't just like clothing. She built something from it. A real business, a legacy company, with real people employed, real contracts, real money. Not influencer fashion, not buy a tote bag and call it a brand. This was the kind of business that had a showroom in the city, a full staff, a warehouse, a production calendar that dictated seasons. My grandma's name meant something in our city. She made clothes the way a surgeon works, precise, careful, unapologetically competent. And my parents and Nicole, they treated it like a magical fountain. They lived off payouts and perks and access like it was their birthright. They talked like heirs. They dressed like heirs. They acted like they had built the castle simply because they were born inside the walls. But they liked being associated with my grandma's success without doing any of the work that created it. Nicole especially loved the image of it. She loved telling people at parties, "Oh, my family owns a fashion company," letting the sentence hang in the air, doing all the heavy lifting for her ego. But Emma cared about the craft. Emma would ask my grandma questions that made my grandma's eyes sharpen with sudden interest. Why does this fabric pull like that? How do you make a collar sit clean? What's the difference between something that looks expensive and something that is well made? My grandma noticed. Not in a dramatic, "you are the chosen one" way. In a quiet, practical way. Emma would show her a seam, and my grandma would nod once. That single nod meant more to Emma than any flowery compliment Nicole had ever faked. Over time, their bond grew in the margins of family gatherings. Quiet conversations in corners, little lessons on fabric weight and drape. My grandma lending Emma a pattern and saying, "Bring it back with notes." Emma lighting up like someone had handed her a key to a secret library. And my grandma also noticed something else. Emma wasn't just talented. She was being treated cruelly in the exact same way I had been treated. And my grandma, the only truly fair person in our family, had been watching for years, tallying the score. I didn't know the specifics then. I only knew this. My grandma was paying attention, and she was quietly getting serious. And back at that celebration, when she stood up and smiled at Emma, I should have realized my grandma wasn't standing to smooth things over. She wasn't standing to offer a toast. She was standing to end something. The room felt different when we snapped back into the present moment, like someone had turned the temperature down 2 degrees, and everyone's skin noticed the chill. My grandma stood upright, steady, her hands lightly resting on the edge of the head table as if she owned the air, which in that moment, she honestly did. She looked directly at Nicole. "You really called her stinky in front of strangers," she said. It wasn't a question. Nicole's smile came out big and shiny, a reflexive defense mechanism. "It's just a joke, Grandma." My grandma didn't raise her voice. She didn't scold. She just tilted her head slightly, like a bird examining a worm, and said, "If it's a joke, explain what's funny." Nicole's smile twitched at the corners. "Oh, come on, Grandma." Nicole started, throwing her hands up as if the word grandma might magically stop the consequences of her actions. My grandma turned her head toward Nicole like she was turning a page in a boring book. "Don't, oh, come on me," she said, her voice dropping an octave. "You're a grown woman. Act like one." A hush rippled through the room, silencing the last of the whispers. My grandma walked over to Emma. Not to Nicole, not to my parents, to Emma. She took Emma's hand gently, her skin papery, but her grip firm. "Come here, sweetheart," she said, her voice warm, a stark contrast to the ice she had just directed at Nicole. Emma looked at me like she was asking permission to breathe. her eyes wide. I nodded once, a silent go-ahead. Emma stepped forward, and my grandma squeezed her hand like she was reminding her, "You are safe. You are not alone. I have you." My dad forced a laugh, a desperate choking sound, like he could laugh the moment back into harmlessness. "It's a family party," Dad said, wiping sweat from his upper lip. "Let's not do this right now." My grandma looked at him, her gaze withering. "Then you shouldn't have laughed," she said. Dad's laugh died in his throat, strangled by the truth. My grandma faced the room, addressing the audience that Nicole had tried to entertain. "You all keep treating her like she's nothing," she said. My mom jumped in fast, her voice high and offended, clutching her pearls. "We do not!" My grandma lifted a hand. Not dramatic, just final. A stop sign. "Yes," she said, "you do. I've watched it for years. I've watched the comments, the exclusions, the mockery." Nicole shifted, still trying to play it off, rolling her eyes. And my grandma's gaze didn't waver. "And since you care so much about the future," she continued, looking at Nicole, "here's the truth." My stomach clenched. Emma's fingers tightened around mine. "That little girl you just mocked," my grandma said, her voice calm and steady, echoing off the high ceiling. "She's not who you've been treating her like." She paused, letting the room settle into the silence. "She's my great-granddaughter," she continued, "and she's the one I've chosen to carry on what I built." There was a shift then, not shock yet, but confusion, a cognitive dissonance rippling through the family. My grandma didn't rush it. "I didn't choose her for sentiment," she said. "I chose her because she works, because she learns, because she respects the craft instead of just wearing the results." She looked directly at Nicole, and then at my parents, her eyes hard as flint. "That company you all assume belongs to you," she said. "It doesn't." Another beat of silence. "When I'm gone, it goes to her, all of it, the shares, the control, the assets." The room made a sound, not a gasp, not a scream. More like the collective inhale of people realizing they'd been standing on thin ice, and the cracks were finally spreading. Nicole blinked hard, her face going slack. "What?" Dad's face tightened, turning a dangerous shade of red. "What did you just say?" Nicole's voice shot up, shrill and panicked. "You can't be serious. She's a kid." My grandma nodded once. "Exactly. A kid you've been bullying." Nicole stabbed a finger toward Emma's dress, her composure fracturing. "Look at her!" Nicole snapped. "She looks—" I stepped in before the word could land, my voice cutting across the space. "Stop talking about my child like she's not standing here," I said. Nicole's eyes flashed toward me, furious, betrayed. My mom tried the soft voice, the manipulative whisper she used when she wanted control without looking controlling. "Okay, we can talk about this later, privately," Mom said, reaching for Grandma's arm. My grandma's smile turned cold, and she pulled her arm away. "No," she said, "because later is how you keep getting away with it. We are doing this now." Dad leaned forward, jaw tight, veins pulsing in his neck. "You're doing this because of one stupid joke? You're destroying the family over a joke?" My grandma's voice stayed level, terrifyingly calm. "No," she said. "This didn't start tonight. Tonight was just the last time." Nicole's face was going blotchy. I read patches blooming on her neck. Panic was clawing its way through her charm. And then my grandma added calmly, like she was reading a grocery list. "And before anyone starts yelling, this isn't a speech. It's already signed. The lawyer handled it weeks ago. I brought copies just in case I would need them." She gestured to her purse. Nicole's mouth opened and closed like a fish on a dock, unable to find a sentence that would change reality. "So what?" Nicole said, voice shaking with rage and fear. "You're just cutting us out?" My grandma looked at her with pity. "I was going to make sure everyone was comfortable," she said. "I had provisions." My mom's eyes widened. She could hear the implication, the past tense, and she hated it. My grandma continued, slow and clear. But after what you just did to that little girl, humiliating her for sport, I changed my mind. Nicole stepped closer, eyes bright with panic. Fix it now. My grandma tilted her head. Or what? Nicole's gaze flicked just for a split second toward Emma. It was small. It was quick, but I saw it. It was a look of pure malice. I pulled Emma behind me without thinking, shielding her body with mine. Guests stared. No one laughed. No one looked away, fast enough to pretend they didn't see what was happening. Nicole shouted, abandoning all pretense of elegance. "You're ruining my life," my grandma answered, almost gentle, like she was explaining gravity to a child who had jumped off a roof. "No," she said. "I'm stopping you from ruining hers." Mom and Dad grabbed their coats, their movements jerky and angry. Nicole's face twisted into a mask of pure rage. "This isn't over," she hissed. Then they stormed out of the celebration. Nicole first, heels striking the floor like hammers. Grant trailing after her, like he'd been dragged by a bad decision. Tyler, Avery, and Illa looked confused and irritated, like they'd just been told the world didn't revolve around them for the first time in their lives. The music kept playing, an upbeat jazz number that felt surreal against the tension. Someone awkwardly clinked a glass. Like that might restart reality. Emma whispered, very small, her voice trembling. "Mom, what just happened?" I crouched and held her face gently, wiping a tear from her cheek. "You're okay," I said. "I've got you." My grandma stepped closer and rested her hand on my shoulder, steady and heavy. And I knew the real fight starts after tonight. The retaliation didn't start with Nicole calling me directly. That would have been too honest, too direct. It started with other people. Relatives who suddenly discovered my phone number still worked. People who hadn't checked on me in years, developing a deep spiritual concern for my grandma's well-being. My phone buzzed on a Tuesday morning. A cousin. "Hey, are you okay? Aunt says Grandma's confused, and you're handling her stuff now." Another message minutes later. "I heard you made her sign something. That's really serious, Lauren." A voice note from an aunt I hadn't seen since Christmas 3 years ago. Soft tone, sharp implication. "We're just worried someone might be taking advantage. You know how old she is." It was the same rumor, in different outfits. Grandma's confused. Lauren's controlling her. Emma's being used. I stared at the screen and felt my body go cold. Not angry yet. Cold. Because the wording was too similar, too coordinated. It was a script. And then Nicole got brave enough to put her fingerprints on it. The family group chat lit up. The one that's mostly used for passive-aggressive holiday scheduling and photos of food nobody asked for. Nicole wrote, "For everyone asking, Grandma signed documents she didn't fully understand. Lauren has been isolating her and using Emma to guilt her. If anyone actually cares about Grandma, please check on her. This isn't about money, it's about protecting her." I read it twice, letting the audacity wash over me. Then I laughed once, out loud, alone in my kitchen, because nothing screams, "This isn't about money," like a paragraph about legal documents. So Emma walked in with her backpack and paused when she saw my face. "Mom?" she asked. I put my phone face down on the counter, like it was something poisonous. "Nothing you need to carry," I said, trying to smooth the edge out of my voice. "Go wash your hands." She hesitated, looking at the phone. "Is it because of me?" That question hit me in a place I didn't like. A deep ache in my chest. I kept my voice even. "No, this is because adults can't handle consequences." She nodded, but I could see it. The guilt was already trying to make itself a home in her chest, whispering that she was the cause of the storm. So I did what I've learned to do with people like my family. I took receipts. I saved screenshots. I saved voice notes. I made a folder on my laptop. I titled it something boring because boring is how you stay sane. Messages. Then I drove to my grandma's house. I didn't march in dramatic. I didn't cry. I sat down at her kitchen table, opened the folder, and showed her what they were saying, what Nicole had written in her own words. My grandma read quietly, her glasses perched on her nose. Then she looked up, calm as stone. "So that's the story she picked," she said. I swallowed. "They're telling people you're not you, that you're senile." My grandma nodded once. "Fine." She picked up her phone and called her attorney. Speakerphone. No mystery, no theatrics, just adults handling adult consequences. I listened as my grandma, in her measured voice, said things like, "Send a letter, stop the defamation, make it clear." Then I asked the question that had been buzzing in my brain like a trapped fly. Can they undo it? Can they challenge the will? My grandma didn't blink. "No," she said. "It's already done properly. Witnesses, competency tests, video recording. Plain English, grounded, final." I breathed out slowly, feeling the air return to my lungs. That night, my phone rang. Dad. And the second I saw his name, I knew the smear campaign had hit the stage where it stops pretending to be concerned and starts being angry. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. It was short, sharp, and full of the kind of rage that tries to sound like authority. "Lauren," Dad snapped, "you're going to fix this. You're going to stop embarrassing this family. Call me back." I saved it. And 2 days later, my doorbell camera pinged. I looked at my phone, and there they were. Mom, Dad, Nicole, Grant, Tyler, Avery, Illa, all standing on my porch like they were auditioning for Most Insincere Apology of the Year. Mom was smiling so hard, it looked painful, her teeth bared. Dad had his jaw set, like he was already mad at me for not solving the problem they created. Nicole's face was bright and sweet in the way that makes your skin crawl, a mask of sisterly affection. I opened the door but didn't step aside. I filled the frame. Mom started immediately. "Sweetheart, we just want to talk. We've been praying." Nicole leaned forward, soft voice, eyes wide. "We love her. We love you. We're family." Dad jumped in, impatient. "Enough drama. Tell Grandma to stop this." There it was. Not an apology, a demand. I blinked. "That's why you're here." Mom clutched her chest. "We didn't mean it. It was a joke." I kept my voice level. "A joke is funny." That was humiliation." Nicole laughed like she still believed she could charm reality into changing shape. "Oh, please, Lauren. You're acting like we hit her." I held the door frame, gripping the wood. "You laughed while she stood there." Mom lowered her voice like she was sharing a secret. "Just tell Grandma you were emotional. Tell her you misunderstood. She'll calm down." I stared at her, seeing her clearly for the first time in years. "You want me to lie so you can keep your access." Nicole's smile slipped, revealing the sneer underneath. "Don't be disgusting." I kept my voice steady. "You're not welcome here." Dad's face hardened. "You're really choosing this? You're choosing money over family?" I nodded. "I'm choosing my child." Nicole took a step closer, irritation leaking through the sugarcoating. It was one joke," she snapped. "And honestly," she rolled her eyes and muttered just loud enough to be heard, "she does stink sometimes." Behind me, in the hallway, Emma made a tiny sound like her breath caught. Mom hissed, "Stop." Too late. I looked at Nicole, steady, cold. "Get off my porch," I said. Nicole's face twisted. "You think you won?" "I think you showed me who you are," I said. Then I closed the door. Through the wood, I heard Dad spit. "This isn't over." I opened my phone and saved the doorbell footage. Date, time, receipt. And then a few days later, I came home from the grocery store, and something was wrong inside the house. I knew it the second I opened the door. The air felt wrong. Not messy, not loud. Wrong. Disturbed. Then I heard it. Soft, crying. I rushed into the living room, dropping my bags, and then found Emma at the dining table, shoulders tight, cheeks wet, trying to swallow her tears like she could hide them. And there, too casual, too comfortable, sat Nicole. Grant was near the doorway, like he wanted to evaporate into the drywall. Tyler, Avery, and Illa were hovering around Emma's sewing corner, like vultures, pretending to be curious. Nicole turned when she saw me, eyebrows lifting, like I'd surprised her in my own house. "Oh," she said brightly. "Hey!" I stared, my pulse hammering in my neck. "What are you doing here?" Nicole shrugged, sweet voice. "We just came to see Emma. We wanted to be nice." My throat went tight. "You came when I wasn't home." Nicole waved a hand. "She let us in." Emma flinched at that like she'd already been blaming herself. I moved to Emma immediately, placing a hand on her shoulder. Did you let them in?" I asked softly. Emma nodded, tears spilling again. They said they were sorry." Nicole's voice turned syrupy. "We are sorry." I looked at Nicole, feeling a rage so pure it was almost calming. "What did you say to her?" Nicole laughed lightly. "Nothing. We just talked." Emma's voice cracked. "They said Grandma made a mistake." My stomach dropped. Emma kept going, words tumbling out, like she couldn't keep them inside anymore. "They said Grandma didn't understand what she signed." Nicole jumped in fast, smiling. We were being gentle. We didn't want to upset her. Emma wiped her face with her sleeve. "They said if I just told Grandma, they were nice to me." I froze. "Nice how?" Emma swallowed. "Like, that it was just a joke. That they didn't mean it the way it sounded. That they're always good to me." "Really?" She looked at the floor. "They said if I told her that, she might change her mind." Nicole tilted her head like she was explaining something to a toddler. "Emma, sweetheart, we're trying to help you," she cooed. "This is a lot for a kid to handle." Emma's eyes squeezed shut. "And they said, if I don't fix it, I'll be the reason Mom's family is broken." That line landed like a rock. A threat disguised as concern. Classic Nicole. I crouched beside Emma. "Hey, look at me." Emma's eyes met mine, terrified. "That is not your job," I said, slow and clear. "That is not your burden. You break nothing. They broke it." Behind us, there was a small clatter. I turned. Ela was too close to the sewing machine. Tyler was smirking. Avery had a piece of fabric in her hands, like it was trash. I'm pulling at the weave. "Don't touch that," I said, voice flat. Tyler shrugged. "We were just looking." I stepped over, and my stomach sank further. The machine looked wrong. Thread tangled in a way that didn't happen by accident. The top thread looped tight, like someone had yanked it hard. The needle was bent at a sick angle. The little box where Emma kept spare needles was open, and one was missing. The hand wheel was stiff, like it had been forced past the point it wanted to go. Emma whispered. "They were being nice at first. Then they started touching it. I told them to stop." Nicole rolled her eyes. "It's a machine, Lauren." "It's her safe place," I said. Tyler shrugged again like he was bored. "It was old anyway." Emma's voice was tiny. "It wasn't." Then Avery, 12-ish, old enough to know better, muttered, She deserved it." Silence hit the room like a slap. Nicole's smile flickered. "What did you just say?" I asked quietly. Avery looked away. Nicole snapped, "Don't be dramatic." I stood up slowly. My hands were shaking, but my voice stayed steady. "Out," I said. "Lauren!" Nicole scoffed. "Out," I repeated, the word vibrating in the walls. Grant finally shifted, murmuring, "Nicole, let's go." Nicole's face hardened. "You're insane. You're turning her against us." I pointed at the door. "Out." They left, with the kind of offended rage that only comes from people who genuinely believe consequences are unfair. The moment the door shut, Emma started apologizing like she couldn't stop. I didn't know," she said, breathy and panicked. They said they were sorry. I thought. I grabbed her hands gently. Stop, I said. I'll listen to me. You didn't do anything wrong. You trusted adults who should have acted like adults. That is not a flaw. She shook her head. But if I hadn't opened the door. If you hadn't opened the door, I said, they would have found another way. This is not on you. Then I did something practical, because practical is how you put your own heart back in your chest. I took photos of the machine. 3 angles, close-ups, the bent needle, the missing spare needle box, the jammed thread. That night, I took the machine to a repair shop. The technician looked at it for 2 minutes, frowned, and said, "This isn't wear and tear. Someone forced it, jammed the mechanism." He printed a repair estimate receipt. I put it in the same folder as the doorbell footage and the screenshots. Then I called my grandma. I didn't rant. I didn't perform. Niece, I told her the facts. They came to my house when I wasn't home. They pressured Emma to fix it. They sabotaged her machine. My grandma went quiet. Then she said very softly, "Put your phone down. I'll handle it." The next day, my phone buzzed with an email from my grandma's attorney. Attached was a copy of the notice that had been sent out that morning. Cease and desist. No contact. All communication through counsel. Stop contacting the child. Stop showing up at the home. And for the first time in my life, family drama wasn't a screaming match. It was boundaries with teeth. Nicole wasn't the kind of person who could resist testing a locked door. 2 days later, my grandma called me. Her voice was calm, but there was a little edge to it. The kind she got when someone tried her patience. "They came to the business," she said. My stomach tightened. "Nicole?" "Yes," my grandma said. "And your father and Grant?" "Of course." A full delegation. My grandma didn't sound shocked. She sounded tired. "They thought if they showed up in person, they could make it a conversation," she said. And you could hear the quotation marks in her voice. "What happened?" I asked. My grandma paused just long enough to make it satisfying. "They were denied access," she said. I closed my eyes. "They argued with security," my grandma continued. "They demanded to see me. They said I was being controlled." "Let me guess," I said. "They said it wasn't about money." My grandma made a small hum that might have been a laugh. "They were told to leave," she said. "They didn't." "And then?" I asked. "And then," my grandma said, voice smooth as glass, "security logged it. My attorney was notified, and they were formally warned again to stop. If they return, they will be trespassed. A paper consequence is one thing. A security guard saying no in public is another." Later that evening, my phone buzzed. A voicemail from Nicole. Her voice was sweet for exactly 1 second, like she couldn't decide which mask to wear. "Lauren," she said too light, "this is insane." Then the sweetness cracked. "You think you can do this to us? You think you can take everything and hide behind Emma? If you don't fix this, you're going to regret it." Click. I didn't call her back. I forwarded it to my grandma's attorney. Then I went to Emma's room and sat on the edge of her bed. "New rule," I said. Emma looked up, wary. "We don't open the door for anyone," I said. "Not Nicole, not Grandma's messengers, not anybody. Think if someone shows up, you call me. You don't talk. You don't explain. You just call me." Emma's shoulders dropped a fraction. "Okay. And if anyone ever tries to make you feel like it's your job to fix adult problems," I added, "you tell me, immediately." Emma's eyes filled, but she blinked hard and nodded. 6 months later, the smear campaign was dead. Not because Nicole got nicer, but because it stopped landing. My grandma kept showing up sharp, consistent, documented. So, the "she's confused" angle ran out of oxygen. And then the money stopped. For years, my parents and Nicole had been living off a monthly stipend from the company, about $12,000 a month between them, for family support and consulting. that mostly meant showing up when cameras were around. 6 months after that celebration, it was 0. By the 1-year mark, the consequences were loud enough to hear from across town. They sold the house. Not downsized, sold. Moving truck, cardboard boxes, the whole thing. Nicole had to get a real job, one where you can't roll your eyes at your boss and call it confidence. She didn't last long at the first one, or the second. My dad tried too, until someone younger than him told him what to do. And he acted like that was oppression. My mom started listing her barely worn designer stuff online like it was a business. It wasn't. It was liquidation. And Nicole's kids, Tyler, Avery, and Illa, lost their minds. They'd been raised like designer labels were basic human rights. When the labels disappeared, the tantrums didn't. Loud public meltdowns, screaming over shoes, a melting down over being told no. I didn't learn any of this because I was hunting gossip. I learned it because they kept trying to reach me. New numbers, new emails, relatives sent as messengers. And every time the same thing leaked out, they didn't miss Emma. They missed the money. We stayed no contact. We replaced Emma's sewing machine with a professional model, heavy and solid. And one night, about a year later, I walked past her room and heard that steady hum again. Calm, stubborn, normal. I peeked in. Emma was bent over fabric, focused, hands steady. No flinching, no shrinking. Just my daughter working like she finally believed she was allowed to take up space. So, what do you think? Did my grandmother do the right thing, or did she go too far? Let me know in the comments and subscribe for more.